So after a breakup, the conventional wisdom is that you should prioritize self-care. Move your body, eat well, get plenty of rest, do things that make you happy, take yourself on a date. You don't need to look good for anyone else. Look good for you. Learn to find joy in being alone. The lesson is that your worth is not contingent on the approval of others, but something that is found within, a fact that you might have forgotten while you were seeking the affection of another person. It feels good to be loved. It feels even better to love yourself. So when my partner and I separated earlier this year, my friends and my therapist suggested that it would be a good change of pace to be by myself for a while. It had been years since I was last single, and this could be time to reconnect with parts of myself that had been decentered while dating, to figure out what I had sought from a partner and create that reality on my own terms. Love comes from within, right? But then I found myself walking through my empty apartment, skeptical if happiness can really be found in the quiet and lonely corners of my life. And I've spoken to so many of you these past few months who have wondered the same thing. After burying a loved one, or watching a friendship fall apart, or walking away from a community where you no longer felt welcome. It's not easy learning to be alone. We are inherently social creatures. We are hardwired to connect with one another. In the story of creation, God looks at the first human and says, Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It is not good for humankind to be alone. Even the mythic abundance of Eden cannot make up for a lack of companionship. When I was a student at Oxford, my college benediction was nullius bone sine socio iucunda possessio est. Nothing is worth having unless it is shared with others. And it's true. Think of your favorite memories. I know that most of mine are made with other people. There's something about a shared experience that makes it richer, more meaningful, more memorable. It is in our neurological makeup to seek connection. The instinct to exist in relationship with others has been essential for our species' survival. When the psychologist Abraham Maslow proposed his hierarchy of needs, he recognized that a sense of belonging is a necessary building block of a fully actualized person. Yet we don't just exist side by side with other human beings. Starting as children, mirroring the emotions of our caretakers, we take other people's experience of the world and we make it part of our own. We witness someone in pain and we cry. We listen to someone's joy and we share in their laughter. Like Adam encountering Eve for the very first time, declaring that this one is basar mi basari, flesh of my flesh. There is a symmetry between our hearts and the hearts of other human beings. But this genetic inheritance also makes us vulnerable. We care about what other people think. We are impacted by how they feel. And sometimes what they think and how they feel, it hurts us. To protect ourselves, we set boundaries, drawing a line between the opinions of others and what we know to be true about ourselves. And boundaries have become a sort of obsession of pop psychology, which really valorizes the individual journey toward self-actualization. This was a term that was coined by the organismic theorist Kurt Goldstein to describe this innate drive to realize one's full potential, and it was placed at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You don't have to wander far into social media to encounter affirmations for boundary setting. Maybe you've heard a few of these. If it doesn't serve you, let it go. It's not my job to fix others. Protect your peace. The journalist Tyler Austin Harper recently observed that "you do you" has become its own 3-word Bible in our quest for self-actualization. Now, don't get me wrong, healthy boundaries are important. When our self-image relies on the approval of others, our well-being becomes contingent on something entirely outside of our control. We can lose sight of the fact that we are, by birthright, beings of inherent worth and dignity, a fact that our tradition insists upon. A society preoccupied with self-improvement can make us feel like we're always a little less than. And when someone hurts us, especially someone that we care about, it's easy to forget that our value does not depend on another person's positive appraisal of who we are. And so, after a breakup, sometimes we need, to quote Megan Thee Stallion, a hot girl summer. Really just time to do you, rather than worrying about what other people think about you, our exes most of all. And that was my plan. That was my plan. Now, the problem with this plan is I had already booked a cruise with my former partner. And for those of you keeping score, you might remember that I faced a similar conundrum many years ago after my divorce. I clearly have a terrible time with booking cruises. So my mother, hi Mom, my mother suggested that I could find a friend to take his place. And my therapist wondered if actually maybe going by myself could be a positive step towards self-discovery. But in the end, we decided to go together. We had both been looking forward to this trip for months, and it would be our European farewell tour, a chance to close one chapter of our relationship and begin a new one. Although we were no longer dating, we certainly cared about each other. He was and is my best friend, a fact that hadn't changed as we started to disentangle our lives. Now, for those of you who are wondering, I'll cut to the end. It was a good trip. It was a very good trip, but it was a difficult trip. It's not easy to stay close to someone you have hurt. For every moment of laughter, there were tears. Each day, I sat with my former partner, watching him pick up the pieces of his broken heart. And there was nothing that I could do to help him put them back together. Like the opening liturgy of Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, ve'esarei, ushvuei, ve'charamei, ve'konamei, ve'kinusei, ve'chinuye, all of the vows I had made, the promises, the prohibitions, the oaths, the restrictions, and the interdictions, all of them broken, null and void, as if they had never been made. Seeing the impact of my choices, my intent no longer mattered, no matter how earnest or hopeful that it might have been. I hurt the person who I had promised to protect from harm. And here we were, forced into painful proximity for 10 consecutive days. I could not escape the brokenness that I had caused, but had to tend to it, even if there was nothing I could do but sit with him in his heartbreak. When listing the mitzvot, the rabbis name 4 commandments as acts of imitatio Dei, of imitating the divine or doing as God would do. They are clothing the naked, visiting the sick, comforting mourners, and burying the dead. Now, this last one is called Chesed Shel Emet, the truest kindness, for it comes with no benefit to the person performing the mitzvah. And while the needy are relieved of their hardship, while we hope that the sick will heal and mourners will move through their grief, there is no solution to death. This mitzvah is so important that the rabbis teach, if you're going about your day and you encounter a funeral procession, you should pause what you are doing and accompany the dead to their final resting place, even if you don't know the deceased, and even if you don't know the people who are remembering them. Our tradition calls us to stand in proximity to pain, including and perhaps most importantly, pain that we cannot fix. The psalmist writes, Karov Adonai lenishbarei lev. God is close to the brokenhearted. There is something so sacred about choosing to be in the presence of brokenness, even when it doesn't feel good or serve us in some way. There is an important distinction to be drawn between what is uncomfortable and what is not safe. And our obsession with boundaries has made it increasingly difficult to differentiate between the two. The journalist I quoted earlier, Tyler Austin Harper, argues that this is the result of what he calls therapeutic libertarianism. The belief that self-actualization is the ultimate goal in life and that anything that impedes this process should be discarded. It is therapeutic because it masquerades as self-help. It is libertarian because it makes a cult of the individual, prizing personal freedom above all other things. And it often begins by cutting out the toxic people from our lives. I'm sure you've encountered this advice. And sometimes we do this for good reason, separating ourselves from folks who subject us to emotional or physical abuse. No one should suffer an abusive relationship. But therapeutic libertarianism encourages us to use this label of toxic carelessly. We become intolerant of people and places that exhaust us or contradict us or are inconvenient or make us feel bad. We remove the critical voices from our lives. We stop talking to people who have different opinions. We turn away from situations that make us uncomfortable, all in the name of living our authentic truth. This is the dangerous but seductive narcissism of self-care. It begins with a well-meaning attempt to divest ourselves from worrying so much about the opinions of others. It comes from an honest place of believing that we have the tools to realize our own potential. But by turning inward and away from what we don't like, we can become inflexible, intolerant, and unreliable judges about what is actually true about ourselves and others. With each new boundary, we narrow our window onto the world until all we see is only what we want to see. When we say someone is toxic, do we actually mean they're unsafe, or that their thoughts and their feelings challenge us? Making space for someone else means that we don't always get to do what we want to do. So we cut them out. It feels nice to do your own thing without worrying about others or the limitations they impose upon you. But it's not good for humankind to be alone. In study after study, interpersonal connection remains the #1 predictor of human health and well-being. Interacting with other people keeps our minds nimble and our hearts open. Community contributes to our resilience, not only because we can lean on others, but because it engenders identity and a sense of greater purpose. We were never meant to make this journey by ourselves. Choosing to be in relationship with other people means caring about what they think and how they feel. And what they think and how they feel can sometimes make us confront parts of ourselves that we would rather not see. Healthy boundaries can protect our truth, but boundaries indiscriminately applied can also shield us from other important truths, ones that we might not discover otherwise until they are expressed through the experience of another person. We instinctually separate ourselves from what hurts the most, and there are times, if we're being very honest, when what hurts the most is the hurt that we have caused. As I sat with my former partner, I had to recognize that I was not always the victim of my own story. I also had the capacity to be the perpetrator, the one who caused harm, that I could be selfish and bullheaded, that I could break promises. Weathering the dissolution of my relationship a few years shy of turning 40, it has been very easy to feel sorry for myself. I will level with you. I am incredibly anxious about a future in which I die alone. It is hard to face this possibility, and harder still to recognize that it might be one of my own creation, shaped by the choices that I have made. But as I accompanied my relationship to its final resting place, burying all that had been lost, this was a truth that I had to bear. Sitting Shiva for the person that I thought I was, in the presence of the person that I had become. What is our obligation when we see someone about to cause harm? The rabbis use the example of a rodef, someone who is pursuing another to kill them. The scenario is almost vaudevillian, like it's like a sketch by the Marx Brothers, and I want you to picture this with me, okay? You are out for a walk. You see two people running. The pursuer is wielding a knife, so you shout at them, "What are you doing with that knife?" They respond, "I want to kill this person." Maybe you misheard them, so you pick up your pace to close the distance between the two of you, and you say, "Hey, friend, what are you planning to do with that knife?" And the pursuer answers, "I am going to kill them." You're now running alongside them, and you ask, "Don't you know that it's wrong to kill someone?" And they answer, "Yes, I know this." And so you ask, "And don't you know that once you kill someone, there is no recourse, there's no turning back?" And they answer, "Yes, I understand." And you say, "But you plan to do this anyway?" And they answer, "Yes, I do." This is in the Talmud, folks. At this point, you are obligated to stop them, perhaps by tripping them or by taking away their knife. Only as a last resort are you allowed to employ lethal force. Behind the comedy of this scene is a serious lesson about tochacha, or rebuke. This is not criticism offered from a distance or behind a keyboard, for that matter. It is an action that calls us into relationship with one another, contingent on our belief that the other person can actually change for the better. And it requires our willingness to be part of that process, quite literally running up beside them, finding the person where they are and accompanying them on their journey. It is offered in a way that can be received and understood by the other. It demands proximity not only of our bodies, but of our hearts and minds as well. Tochacha crosses the boundaries of narcissistic individualism, of cutting out and cutting off the folks who do things we don't like or don't agree with. Instead of canceling them, we remain connected to them. This means that we stay close to the messiness of other people, including the people who make us uncomfortable. It means we have to care about what they think and how they feel. And to be quite frank, sometimes the people who make us the most uncomfortable are the ones who offer the tochacha, the rebuke that we don't want to hear. To stay close to someone we have hurt forces us to recognize that we are not always the victim. Sometimes we are the perpetrator. To remain proximate to our mistakes and the people who remind us of them makes us acknowledge that we are not always at the receiving end of bad decisions. Sometimes we're their cause. To be in relationship with folks who understand the world in a different way challenges us to admit that we are not always right. Sometimes we are wrong. Tochacha drags us, kicking and screaming out of the comfort of doing you, to see how the mirror of our self-image may not be the most accurate reflection of who we really are. It is hard to stand face to face with an honest picture of ourselves, especially when it is being held up by another person. And this kind of intimacy, caring about what another person thinks and feels, makes us incredibly vulnerable to being hurt ourselves. There is a story about Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, two of the greatest scholars of our tradition. They were both colleagues and friends. Living in extreme poverty, Reish Lakish survived as a thief until a chance encounter with Rabbi Yochanan led him to study Torah. With his help, Reish Lakish became his equal in scholarship. Now, one day, they were discussing how laws of ritual purity could or could not be applied to weapons of war. When Reish Lakish disagreed with Rabbi Yochanan, the latter retorted, "Well, a thief would know the tools of his trade." Reish Lakish responded, "What benefit did you provide me bringing me close to Torah? There I was called a thief, and here you call me a thief." Reish Lakish was hurt, and rightfully so. Rabbi Yochanan had employed knowledge of Reish Lakish's past, the kind of knowledge only accessible to a close friend, to undermine him, weaponizing the intimacy of their relationship. And this choice had consequences. Reish Lakish severed their relationship, and Rabbi Yochanan dies of heartbreak. This is the risk of proximity, the vulnerability of being known, and them knowing how to strike you where it hurts the most. Wouldn't it just be easier to set firm boundaries between us and other people, to just do us, to avoid that kind of pain? But to see ourselves reflected by other people, especially those who understand and ultimately admire us, is how we grow. The very same eyes that saw Reish Lakish as a thief in that moment had also understood his capacity to be a great scholar, something he had never considered until Rabbi Yochanan identified this potential, leading him to a life of learning. His wisdom still guides our practice today. The intimacy of knowing someone and being known by them can be used as a weapon, but it is also the tool by which we help each other on our journey towards self-actualization, and in the process, become better ourselves. The question is how we use it. Tochacha is an inherently hopeful act. It comes from a place of believing that the other person can blossom and bloom because we see the seeds of a better self that already exists inside them. It is not just saying whatever comes to mind or using the scaffolding of constructive criticism to make a point, which is, to be clear, why Rabbi Yochanan's invocation of Reish Lakish's past does not qualify as tochacha. No, it's an expression of care. It's an expression of connection. It is also the cornerstone of a healthy community as people support each other on their quest for individual fulfillment. What was a solitary task becomes a joint effort. Sincere feedback offered in intimate relationship with another person puts us in a position to receive it in kind. It is a dialogical process that opens both people to pain, yes, but also incredible possibility. An honest reflection of who we are. The agonizing self-awareness that comes from confronting this image is the first step of teshuvah, which means repentance and repair, of course, but also return. Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapira, who taught in the Warsaw Ghetto, once wrote that through teshuvah, we return to who we are meant to be, but have not yet become. We return to growth and possibility that has lain dormant within us and not yet flourished. That is why, he writes, the process of teshuvah, as painful and even humiliating as it can be, is in fact very joyous and hopeful. Tochacha reminds us that we are more than the person we happen to be right now. While this can be hard to acknowledge, there is hope in knowing that your best self has been there all along. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tahorahi, God, the soul you have placed in me is pure. It's just been obscured by bad luck and bad choices, but it's still there, whole and good. This is true for all human beings. When we cut out the people who make us uncomfortable, when we push them to the side or no longer take them seriously, we give up on their chance for redemption. And our tradition firmly rejects that anyone is irredeemable. There's a discussion in the Talmud about the greatest enemies of the Jewish people. These are pretty bad folks. Yet lest you think anyone is beyond redemption, the rabbis teach, did you know that the terrible general, Naaman the Aramean, came to live among our people? Or that Nebuzaradan, who commanded the Babylonian armies that destroyed the first temple, eventually converted to Judaism? Even the descendants of Sisera and the Sennacherib and Haman studied Torah, working to heal the wounds inflicted by their ancestors. Now, this is a daring prescription in a world that has fractured along lines of ideological differences, where there is so much violence inflicted by human beings on other human beings. But that's another sermon entirely. Yet this teaching also contains an even bolder lesson about ourselves. For if we truly believe in the redemption of the worst people imaginable, which our tradition does, we must believe in ours as well. And let's be real. This can sometimes be the hardest thing to accept, especially during a season when we reflect on our shortcomings, beating our chests as we review our long litany of past mistakes. Sitting at the end of another relationship, I could maintain that I am inherently unlovable, wallowing in self-pity, making excuses for my mistakes. Or I could commit to learning how to love better and how to better receive the love offered to me in kind. It's a more difficult task. It requires owning where I went wrong. It demands that I care about how my actions impact others. It asks that I sit with their pain even when that pain can't be fixed. But the tools for change are already there, in my own hands, in the hands of the people who care about me. So this practice, it begins right now. These 25 hours of Yom Kippur, of which we are now a few hours in, invites us to sit with each other in the gap between the people we are and the people that we hope to be. This is hard work. Sometimes the distance between who we thought we were and who we see in that mirror is too painful, feels too difficult to bridge. But we are strong and we are capable, built for receiving the reflection that others hold up to us, even when they reflect things that we don't particularly like about ourselves. And more importantly, if we look closely at that image, we will find that its core, its foundation, is good. Our best self, your best self, has been there all along. Sometimes we just need another person to remind us. Gamar Tov.